Hello, Jerry here with Season 4, Episode 35 of Ask Jerry Tachoir. If you want to ask me a question, simply go to my website, which is www.tachoir.com, Tachoir, and in the upper right-hand corner is a little Contacts tab. Just click on that, fill out your name and email, and you can ask your question, and perhaps we'll do one of these videos. This is going to be a rather unique episode in that in the last several months, I've received this exact same question probably 8 times from different people. And it has to do with how to play thicker, richer chord voicings to have a bigger sound on not only the vibraphone, but on the marimba as well. And so I did a virtual clinic. This was a couple months ago for the Percussive Arts Society. So what I'm going to do at this point is basically rerun that on this Ask Jerry series, so you'll get a chance to see that, because I know that that was only available to Percussive Arts Society members. So anyway, I'm going to rerun this, and it's talking again about playing bigger, thicker chords and expanding your chords so you get a bigger sound so that we can compete in the contemporary world that we live in now with piano players and guitar players and the notes and the volume that they have. So we have to be able to find a way to make it work. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks, and we'll see you at the next time. Hello, my name is Jerry Tachoir. It is a pleasure to be here to offer this virtual clinic to you. I'd like to thank the Percussive Arts Society for the invitation to do so. Today's topic is going to be on creating richer sound with mallet instruments regarding chord voicings. And most of us in the percussion world, we tend to start out as drummers. We get into learning this snare drum and being able to read rhythms and advanced rhythms, through the use of snare drumming. And then we progress into the other parts of percussion, usually drum set. Then we get into timpani and xylophone, marimba, vibraphone, et cetera, et cetera. Once we get into the vibraphone or the marimba, any kind of mallet instrument, then becomes the issue of how do we play these melodies and how do we play these harmonies, and now we're introduced to all that we never had to deal with before. But today's topic is going to be a little bit more refined, in which I want to talk about how we as a mallet player, whether again it's a vibraphone or marimba, can basically compete in the world of guitar players who have amps that go to 11, they have 6 strings, and all the availability that they have with the huge range, and piano players, which has obviously 88 notes and 10 fingers to play. So they can really do some amazing sounds on these instruments. Here we are, a vibraphone player in this case, playing an instrument that's predominantly 3 octaves. Fortunately, I'm with another company that I play an instrument that I call finished. It's a 3.5 octave instrument. And I love this instrument. It has opened up the world to me in terms of availability and just lines that I've always wanted to play. So anyway, how do we then, as a mallet player, compete with, like I said, guitars and piano players? Well, the first thing we have to understand is that when we first start learning chords, as a mallet player, we're going to start learning all our C major 7, C dominant 7, C minor 7, C minor 7 flat 5, C diminished 7, all the chords that are available to us. And we usually learn them in root position. So here's our first chord. Here's a C major 7 chord. C, E, G, B. It's a C major 7 chord stacked in tertiary harmony. No big event. It's a nice chord. It works very well. It serves the purpose of harmonizing that particular sound. However, it's not a very big chord. It just has a nice blend of sound. As we progress musically, we start to get into inversions. First inversions where it's the E on the bottom, E, G, B, C. First inversion, second inversion, the fifth on the bottom, et cetera, et cetera. So we play these different inversions. However, they're still smaller than an octave. And when a chord is smaller than an octave, its sound is somewhat limited. Again, it's a useful chord, and I use it a lot for different situations. But as I develop musically, and as I develop getting more aggressive as the song is becoming more aggressive, I need to find chords that have power. And one quick way that I found out, and by the way, this is in my method book, which is called a contemporary mallet method. I have a whole subject, a whole chapter on this, where I talk about expanding the chords to making a bigger sound, bigger than an octave, to allow us to compete. And one quick way to do this, and it's real interesting. Take that first chord, C major 7. Here's the way it is, tertiary harmony stacked in thirds. All I have to do is replace the outside two voices. So the root that's on the bottom, I'm going to put it on top. The B major 7 that's on the top, I'm going to put it on the bottom. And all I've done is taken this chord and exchanged places with the outside two voices. By doing that real simply, it has created the same chord, but bigger than an octave, which gives me a bigger, more open sound. Listen to it. Here's the original chord. Here's the one exchanging the outside two voices. Original. And you can hear, it's just a more open, bigger sound. Now, there is this situation in this chord that you have to be aware of. The situation is that the outside two voices that I just created by putting the 7th on the bottom and the root on top is an interval of, it's a flat 9 interval. Flat 9 intervals are just like intervals that you have to avoid. They're very dissonant. So, in the confinement of an instrument that doesn't have to tune, such as piano, organ, vibraphone, marimba, these kind of instruments, this chord is fine because it works, it just blends, it's just a very rich chord. However, if you would write this chord for, say, 4 trumpets, where they're always dealing with intonation issues, then the problem comes that the guy playing the bottom B will be hearing the flat 9 with the C, and he want to go sharp to try to, just to make it sound better. And the guy that's playing the C on top, he'll be hearing the discrepancy and the dissonance with the B on the bottom. He'll want to go flat, so you have intonation issues. Now, if that becomes a problem, one way around it is to start substituting specific notes. So, here's the original chord. Here's the chord expanded. Now, if you didn't want that degree of dissonance, that flat 9 interval of the B and the C, then you could substitute tension 9 for the root. Now remember, the root is now our top note. So by substituting it up there, it makes the chord even a little bit bigger, and with that becomes a bigger, warmer sounding chord. So here's the original. Here's the one expanded. Here's the one with tension flat, tension 9. So it doesn't have quite the friction of that dissonance of the flat 9, but by being bigger, it's still a thicker, warmer sounding chord. Again, I do have all these mentioned in my book, and you can get a hold of that and review that chapter so you can understand it a little bit more. And it works for any chord, any inversion. C minor 7. Exchanging the places. C diminished 7, exchanging places. So you're just getting a bigger sound by simply doing that. Now, if you would look at this chord and analyze what has become, it's actually what's known in arranging as a drop 2 chord, meaning that you're taking, in this case, you're taking the note C and you're voicing it down. So let's talk about C major 7. So our top melody note is C. Well, the next note down is a B. The next note under that is the 5th, it's a G. And then you have the E and the C. So C, B, G, E, C. That would be the notes that you would have going down. So if you drop the second note, the B, down an octave, you're dropping the second voicing that's called a drop 2 voicing. So here's the original. Here's C in the melody. Here's a B. Here's a G and E. That's the chord that I'm playing. It's part of a C major 7. It's in first inversion. Okay, so if I took it and I put the B then, drop 2, meaning I'm dropping the second voice down an octave, that's the original chord that I was talking about. All we're doing is exchanging places with the outside two voices, creates a bigger sound, and it's also known as a drop 2 chord. So that helps out a lot. That's a nice way to start to understand how we can compete, how we can create some faster and bigger sounding chords. Now, there are two notes that are the characteristic notes of every chord, and that's predominantly the third and the seventh. These are known as guide tones. By playing just these two notes, you can have an understanding of what the chord progression is. You basically will hear the chord progression with these two notes because these are the two most important notes. Here's an example of a chord progression. I'm going to go from C minor to F7 to F minor 7 to B flat 7, and you'll hear the chord progression. Here you go, C minor 7. Okay, here we go, C minor 7, F7, B flat, E flat. I did two different versions of it. So anyway, that you can hear the chord progression by just playing those two notes. Now, what I do, and again, this is kind of advanced. It takes a little bit of while for you to understand that you have to learn what the thirds and the sevenths are of these chords. But what I do is the biggest, warmest sound of the vibraphone tends to be this lower octave and a half, because the bars are bigger, they have more of a sound, they project a little bit better. So what I try to do is I'm playing a tune, and this is predominantly for solo vibes pieces that I'll be playing. I try to keep these guide tones in my left hand. So my left hand is playing just the guide tones, and then I can fill it in with my right hand melody or another chord tone or tension or improvisation, whatever I'm doing. But I'm kind of keeping the sound of the essence of the chord progression going on in my left hand through the use of guide tones. Now, I don't necessarily just play them as block chords, right? I mean, sometimes I'll play them okay, and that gives me rhythm. So you hear the chord progression because I'm playing the guide tones, and also it becomes sort of my bass player. You hear kind of what the left hand is doing on the piano. And when a piano player is playing, they're kind of keeping a little accompaniment figure going on and trying to support harmonically what's going on while the right hand does the soloing or playing the melody. So let me play a little bit of a tune, and you can understand, you can see and hear what I'm doing. This is just a standard piece, Stella by Starlight, and kind of keep an eye on my left hand and how it's generating the guide tones. And then occasionally my left hand will come up and it'll assist my right hand to play a melody line or something else that I got going on up there. But then it'll go back down and take care of business. So here's a little bit of Stella. Again, playing the essence of the chord down here keeps the harmony flowing, but I'm playing it as a rhythm, and then my right hand will assist, and my left hand will assist my right hand, and then it'll go back down and take care of business. So that's another way that you can make sure that any chord that you play, you're incorporating these guide tones. Guide tones are very important. Now, when I was at Berklee College of Music, there was a course, and it's called line writing. It's predominantly a big band arranging and writing course, and it's taught by Herb Pomeroy. I was reluctant to take this course because it is primarily a big band course, and I'm not really that much into big band as much as I am small ensemble. But everybody told me, Jerry, if you're at Berklee, this is the class you got to take. This is the one. This is like the pièce de résistance of Berkeley. You got to take this class. So I said, well, okay. So it's a class that you have to have a lot of prerequisites. You have to have a lot of different harmony levels and abilities, and you actually have to take a test to get into this class. So I got into the class. And again, I was somewhat apprehensive as to what the class was going to offer me. However, this class, line writing, totally changed the way I think musically and the way I play musically, especially as a four-mallet vibraphone player. Now, Herb has a concept, and it's a really interesting, I'm going to give you the very short version of it. Obviously, I can't give you the whole class. But he'll take a piece of music, and he'll establish where he thinks, harmonically, melodically, whatever, the climactic moment of this piece of music is. And he'll mark that as the prime climax of the tune. And then he'll listen to it again, and he'll establish a couple secondary climaxes, maybe areas in the music that are important, but not quite as powerful as the prime climax. So anyway, he'll label those. And then what he does, he voices the harmony, not necessarily from like the melody down, but he tries to, first of all, he has a concept called, these are called prime dissonances. And prime dissonances are half steps, right? Very dissonant. Major sevenths and flat nine intervals. Okay, so these prime dissonances are very powerful. However, if you could incorporate them within a chord voicing, then that dissonance tends to get masked. However, it adds power to the chord. And let me give you a quick example. D minor 7, flat 5. Here's a D minor 7, flat 5. Tertiary harmony, D, F, A flat, C. Now, I'm going to get rid of the third, and I'm going to put a tension 11 in place, which is the note G. And that creates a half step between the G and the A flat within the chord, and that half step is a prime dissonance. So this prime dissonance then is going to give this chord what Herb calls 1 PD, which means it has one prime dissonance. So here it is. Here's the original chord. Here's the prime dissonance chord. I mean, you can hear there's a friction in there. There's a rub, and that rub is power. It comes from dissonances. Now, the more prime dissonances that you put into a chord, the more they get richer. In other words, if you had a chord that had 2 prime dissonances or even 3 prime dissonances, which means 3 of the intervals of a half step, a major 7, or somewhere a flat 9 interval that's permitted, then it gets more and more powerful each time you add these prime dissonances. Now, there are a lot of rules that go along with this whole course. I'm giving you the extreme, dumbed down, simple version how to think in terms of playing chord voicings. But when he actually gets to the point where he voices his primary climax of a song, say he voices it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 trombones or something like that, and he's looking for as many prime dissonances in that chord voicing that he can get. Prime dissonance, maybe he can get 3, maybe he can only get 2, but those 2 are very powerful. So everything then prior to that climactic moment then will not exceed the prime dissonances that he put at the climactic moment. So if he's got 2 here, then everything prior to it and building up to that area will only have 1. And then the way he writes the lines, which is again the name of the course, allows for intervallic relationships to happen. In other words, he doesn't just go like normal people would, where you voice the melody down, you know what the melody is, a note is a D, and you're putting a C7 chord, so it's D, B flat, G, E, and then you go to the next chord, next melody note. He thinks more linearly, and when you do this kind of thing, what happens then is, well, first of all, if you didn't do that, if you went the traditional route of just taking the top note and harmonizing it, thinking down, generally the 4th trombone player, his part is something like ba ba da 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 dee da 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 da. You know, it's real simple because the way it ends up when you go voicing it down, the bottom line tends to get very stagnant. So it's not very musical. I mean, it wouldn't be fun to be like the fourth trombone player and that was your part. So anyway, he goes through it and he just has these rules of allowing you to create interesting lines and establishing these lines so that each voice, each trombone part then in this case, would have a nice melodic line, somewhat counterpoint to the melody. You know, contrary motion to the melody is a good starting point. Like he'll take the bottom note and the top note and he'll create contrary lines, and then he'll fill it in, and sometimes the lines actually cross where maybe the third trombone player is actually coming above the second trombone player. But each one of those lines, and as the music is going by, is a melodic idea. And with that, it's just way more musical than da 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 da, you know, that you would have to play as your fourth part. So these are all the things as a mallet player that I'm thinking about all the time. As I'm playing chords, as I'm playing with a soloist and I'm supporting them harmonically, if they're being aggressive, in other words, they're really like cooking over there, I might just kind of play real open, kind of staying out of their way. Vice versa, if they're being very open and just kind of, you know, playing nicely, then I could be a little bit more melodically powerful and rhythmically powerful and put some chords in there. But I don't start out with these power chords like right at the beginning. I start my tune simple, trying to just make nice open chords. I mean, I'll expand the chord like I talked about in the very first statement, just to get an open, airy kind of sounding chord. But as the tune progresses, as we build up in tessitura and get to that climactic moment of the tune, then I'm looking for these power chords. Then I'm looking for how can I create some prime dissonances within these chords, and just it takes a lot of mental complication. I mean, you're really thinking it through, like where is it, and again you have to abide by these rules that Herb gave you, which is very important. And also, the other thing I didn't even mention yet is on mallet instruments, well, especially vibraphone, I can not only play 4 notes, but I could go ahead and re-attack another set of 4 notes while it's ringing. You know, I could play like C minor 7. I can go ahead and add to it. And so that is another way of me getting powerful chords. Trying to incorporate the guide tones in the left hand, the fattest area of the vibraphone, really helps a lot. So these are all the kind of things you need to think about as you're creating these thicker chords and trying to, you know, make it make sense with what's going on musically. And it's a challenge. It takes a little bit of work. You have to know your chords. And again, my first thing is learn your chords, right? Playing any chord, any position, right? And then don't play it that way, but then expand the outside voices. So you've got a fatter chord. And again, you're keeping it simple. You're just thinking about the chord, but exchanging places with the outside 2 notes, and that gives you a more airy sounding chord. And then later on, you can start incorporating some of these prime dissonances within a chord and finding how those make sense and how they sound to your ear, and that'll give you the power. By duplicating more notes or playing additional tensions up here on the upper octaves of the instrument is another way of increasing the power of the chord. And these are all things that are like going through your head spontaneously as you're creating this. And it takes a while. This is not an easy technique for anybody. Again, most of us, like I said, percussionists come through the world, and we're lucky if we can play a C major chord in root position. And that's what happens for a long time. I mean, forever and ever, every time you need a C major chord, this is the one you're going to play. Whether you're up here, you remember C major 7 chord, this is the one you want to play. You want to play an F chord, you come down here. And all that moving around, playing chords in root position is very elementary. Okay, so we want to definitely start working on our ability to have a smooth voice leading from chord to chord. So like you're playing a C minor 7, F7, B flat minor 7, E flat 7, A flat, D flat, D minor 7, flat 5, G 7, C minor 7. So you see, as I'm playing these chords, really one or two notes is moving. If I have a constant note that I can carry over to the next chord, I'll just hang on to it and just take the important note that moves and allow it to make the identity of the chord. Voice leading. Again, that's another thing that is really hard to get a concept of. And I advise you to just start slow. Just hold your chords, like C minor 7. Just look at it on the keyboard. Okay? And then you say, okay, I have to get to an F7. Well, what can stay? I got a D up here, got an E flat, I got a G and a B flat. Well, definitely the B flat has to go. So I'm going down to an A. So that's the third of an F7. And if you look at my left hand, I have the third and the seventh. There's my guide tones. I already have the guide tones. So the essence of the chord is there. The thickest part of the chord is identified. So now I can fill it in with tensions or chord tones. So I already have the G. The G is a tension 9 on an F7. And I have the D. The D could be the 13. Well, if I don't want the 13, I could easily just come down and play the 5th. So here I went from this, here's C minor 7, to this. Not a lot of motion. Okay, now I'm at F7. I got A flat, E flat, tension 9, G, and the 5th. Okay, got those. Now I want to get to a B flat major 7 chord. Well, I got the major 7 in my left hand on the bottom. That A, that's the 7th. This E flat needs to go. I need to bring that down to the 3rd. There's my guide tones. There's my 3rds and 7ths already in my left hand. Now, to fill in with the rest of it, I could actually just stay where I am. This could be the 13 of a B flat chord, and this could be the tension 9. If the 13 was something I really didn't want, I really wanted to emphasize more of the B flat major, then I can go down to an F. And again, just two notes really move, just from here to here. Everything else stays the same. And that's called voice leading. Voice leading is just something you've got to take your time, do what I just did, lay it out on your keyboard, analyze the next chord, what needs to be moving, and then make it move, and stop there and hold it, and then say, okay, as I go to the next chord, what can I keep? What do I need to get rid of? I want to make sure I have the guide tones somewhere within this chord voicing. I want to have the 3rds and 7ths, very important, those two notes. Whatever I do, I got to find those and make sure they're coming out. And hopefully, if I can keep them in my left hand, then harmonically it's going to be the thickest and it's the fullest, and it's going to work for me. So, we talked about basically 4 things. We talked about expanding the chords. Outside 2 notes, just change places. Pretty simple. We all can do that right away. That's just a real quick way of making a chord bigger than an octave, which will give you a bigger sound. We talked about guide tones. Guide tones predominantly the 3rds and 7ths of every chord. Keeping those in your left hand because that's the warmest, fattest, most aggressive sound of the instrument, and that way you have an identity to the chord progression with just those 2 notes, which then frees your right hand to go ahead and play whatever else you want to play, chord tone, tension, melody, whatever you have. And then the concept of incorporating prime dissonances. Within any one of those chords that we talked about, then you have to find out, okay, where is the permissible flat 9, major 7, or half step that I can incorporate within this chord to make it sound fuller. And that gets a little bit, like I said, complicated. And then while we're doing that, the next thing we have to think about is voice leading, just making it nice and smooth, going from chord to chord with very little motion. We don't want to be going, jumping around because this is where we know our B flat chord, this is where we know our A flat chord, blah, 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 blah. We want to be able to just leak them right into the next chord and make it sound like they're blending. And that's the whole concept that we have to try to make it, the vibraphone and marimba sound a little bit fuller in our contemporary world. Again, these are challenges, especially for those of us who are new to the keyboard mallet instruments. These are things that you're going to have to spend some time and work out and really think it through and practice. And again, in my book, I have a great explanation of how to think with this within these chords that I'm talking about, and how to find the prime dissonances, and how to make nice, smooth voice leading. And you can get a hold of the book, and that'll help you out a lot. It's called A Contemporary Mallet Method, an approach to the vibraphone and marimba. You can get it, Steve Weiss has it, I believe, and also off of my website and various other places. So anyway, that's all I have to offer in terms of trying to understand the concept of creating thicker, fuller sounds on the vibraphone and marimba, and to allow us to compete in a contemporary world with guitar players and piano players, and hopefully that maybe this will open more work for us, where a band might consider hiring a vibraphone player as opposed to a guitarist or a piano player, because we can do the same thing. Unfortunately, we obviously have a limited range. Fortunately, with me, I have a 3.5 octave vibe, so I've got a little bit more room, but we can still compete harmonically if we use these techniques within our playing, and it tends to sound really good. So thank you so much.